that? Well, you start paying 10 months after the end of the covered period. And then there is like 2 or 5 years from you get the funding where you don't have to pay, where to the end of the payment period. So you have all the way to the end. However, here's the big one, because I don't know what happens if you don't apply before you start paying. How messed up that's going to be administratively at SBA. Remember, they're kind of overwhelmed with all this, but you have up to 10 months after the covered period to start paying. And you really want to get your forgiveness before you start paying, because you don't want to get the first bill and not pay, and then not pay, get a notice and not pay, and then be in default with the SBA. You don't want to be there, because that gets ugly. Another thing there is that we think about the covered periods at 24 weeks. It can be either 8 or 24 in the PPP one. So until you do the forgiveness application, nobody else knows what your covered period is, because not until that do you actually tell them what it is. So SBA won't know what 10 months is. Maybe they assume that it's 24, that it's 10 months after 24 weeks. But I would not take a chance. When you get your stuff together, get your information together, it's not that hard, actually. And get the forgiveness done. Then it's over and done with. No problem, excuse me. So it's get it done before there becomes any issues with the SBA in all that. And very importantly, there's also risk. We know how life is. You get busy, things happen, and you could forget. I know a guy who actually thought he had a PPP loan and had an EIDL, and he couldn't understand why he got these notices until we looked at it and said, well, here it is. So he actually now applying for PPP 1. Point is, don't blow the application. The most important thing you can do here is apply. Get on with your lender, get on the portal, figure out how to apply, because unless you apply, it won't get forgiven and they will want the money back. Let's see here. So, are there forms to fill out for forgiveness? And that's really a two-part question. First is the formal question. Yes, there are 3 forms. There actually are 3 forms. It's the under 150K. It's a 1-page form. It's an easy form. And then there is the big one. However, here is how it actually works. There is no actual real form. It's a lender portal. You go in and the lender has it set up so that you pick, is it under 150? And they know if you are or not. So it goes automatically there. If you're over, it will then go through the rigmarole of having the easy form or the big form. And we're not going to go through the application or the calculation today, but if you're over 150, please look, make sure you can get to the easy form, because it's so much easier. Again, now, typically at the lender, there is no actual form. It's the lender portal that is structured like the form. And you click and you put in your information and things like, are you going to use that same stuff for your forgiveness, etc., especially if you're sole proprietor, then it is the same information as you submitted for the loan. Do I pay taxes on the PPP funds? No, you do not. There isn't any way in any form that you should pay taxes. Up until a month ago or so, a little bit more, yes, you would have to pay taxes because the expenses were not deductible. That is not the case anymore. It's all tax-free. There are no taxes on it. So what does my bookkeeper do with the PPP funds? I don't mean the actual money now. I mean from an accounting basis. So once you are sure you're going to be forgiven, and that doesn't necessarily mean that you have applied, it doesn't necessarily mean that you were approved, and it doesn't necessarily mean that you got the approval for it. It means that you're sure you're going to get it, you know you're going to get it, you've done the calculations, you know that you have the payroll for it. So you have two things that you do here. It is either move it from loan to either A, to reduce the expenses that is associated with it, i.e. labor expenses, or move it directly to equity. And some CPAs say, no, you got to go over to P&L and credit the expenses, or no, you got to move it directly to equity. It doesn't matter really which ones you do, unless you really have some good reason why you want to run it through the P&L to make that look better. I mean, that's a kind of a strategic thing. If that's just going to do a bump for 1 year and now you have to explain next year to a bank or something, you got to think that through. Otherwise, it doesn't make a difference. One thing, make sure when your tax person sends you your taxes and you approve them, make sure that you don't pay taxes on these PPP money. Make sure, ask them how they did it, make sure that it's not in there. And especially if you do your own, on TurboTax or something, and you do this stuff before you actually do your taxes, make sure that you don't make a mistake and bump up your taxable income by the PPP money.
Hey, Chris, there's a question in the Q&A that seems relevant to this. Connie asks, do you include the grant income from the first round in your revenue in the second round?
No, they are not the revenues. When they speak on revenues for the second round, they mean actual operational revenues that you're talking about. So no, don't include those, because that could actually mean for some people that you end up not being reduced by 25%. So answer to that is no, you do not include it in revenues. What is the deadline for PPP2? And actually 1, if you didn't do 2, you can do 1. The deadline is 3/31/21. There are starting to be some murmuring that the money might run out. It doesn't seem all that likely, but why take a chance? Why wait? If you have your information together, especially if you're going to use the payroll information from 2019, the same as you used for PPP1, don't wait. I'm telling you, I did it in 6 minutes or something. It was so easy. They just asked me, you using the same information? Yes. Download the proof here that you had a 25% reduction. And you have that ready. You download one PDF that says, here is 2020, one PDF that says, here's 2019. Both of you sign them beforehand, you download them, and it's done. So I wouldn't wait and risk anything. So another question I'm getting is, am I eligible for the second bite if my net income didn't go down? And that is a commonsensical question, because people think that this has to do with how well I did. It doesn't. You could have a 90% drop in net income. It doesn't matter. You could have a 90% increase in net income. It doesn't matter. What does matter is the gross receipt reduction. you have to have equal to or more than 25% reduction in revenues, or if you're on a cash basic, gross receipts in any quarter in 2020 compared to the same quarter in 2019. Net income has nothing to do with it. There are plenty of companies that didn't have much of a decrease in net income, but they did have a second quarter decrease in revenues of over 25%. That's what matters for this requirement. So do I have to count revenues when it comes to that 25% reduction for revenues I didn't collect? Let's say May 31st, you produce a $10,000 invoice that is not yet collected. Typically, one would go through, and at the end of the year, you do your adjustment, you take it against bad debt, however you do it accounting-wise. In this case, you may want to go back now to the second quarter there, if that's what you're comparing, and take that $10,000 out as a bad debt and take it out of revenues. You're allowed to do that. You can take refunds, returns, and bad debt out of that quarter. You don't have to do it in December from an accounting perspective. So if you're close to the 25%, or if you're close, and if a non-collection or refund kicks you over the bar, then you are allowed to go back and do those kind of things. Long as you between cash and accrual accounting, as long as you're consistent year over year what you do, nobody can say that you can't write off an invoice from somebody who hasn't paid. So you can absolutely do that. So another one is, if I borrow less than 150,000, do I need to substantiate anything for PPP2? Yes, you do. And you will have to substantiate the 25% reduction in revenues. As far as I've seen, everybody has to do that. Maybe when the new 150K form came in, but I think, yeah, that you have to do the 25%. If they don't ask you to do it now, they will ask you to do it later. And if you're using 2019 payroll, then you don't have to do anything with the payroll. You don't have to prove to show them ever anything. Do I have to prove necessity if my total PPP funds between 1 and 2, my totals are less than 2 million? Yes and no. There is no formal certification. There's no form. If you have more than 2 million, there is a form for you to fill out. And if you get audited, it's the same form. And I can tell you, it's not easy to actually fill out. So if you have less than 2 million, which most of us do, basically what you do, you swear that you need it. And for later on, if somebody comes back, just write a memo to you, say that I did a projection, I did a what if, and if my revenues go down by 20%, which I feel is likely, then I'm going to run out of money. Write that memo to you now so you have it. You can just show it if somebody's asking. So what payroll do I need for PPP2? Most will just say, use the 2019 that you have. That's the most easy to do. And for 90% of the people, I know of 2 that didn't do 2019. But 90% at least will use 2019. For one thing is that most people had higher payroll in 2019 than 2020, some exceptions. And in 20, if you have higher payroll in 2020 and it makes a difference, especially if you are around 150,000, if using 2020 makes you go from $148,000 to $150,500, I probably wouldn't do it because of the reporting requirements over 150. I would stick to the other one, the 2019. If you go with 2020, yeah, you have to do the same payroll as you did for the first one. You have to do the payroll reports. You got to have it for everybody, third-party payroll, and you got to have the 941 payroll tax report for that. So can I count use of car as a payroll cost? And this is really an example of non-cash compensation for employees. And non-cash compensation employees do not count. It's just cash compensation, and it got to show up in your payroll reports because they're going to ask for that. If it went through the first time around, and I know people who got some strange things through in the first time around, and if you're prepared to use that again, by all means use it. In one case, I do know of an operation where the person didn't feel that they could actually certify that they needed all of it. In this case, was a lot of money, it was like a little over $1 million. And the person said, I really can't with good conscience certify that I need all of that, but I need a little bit more than half of it. So this person took a little bit more than half of it and with good conscience certified that he needed the money. And then there's, what if I had somebody who just worked for a day? Well, if they work for a day and they're on the payroll report, it counts. It's payroll. So it's payroll. It's payroll. Oh, wait a minute. Those were, now I get into stuff from the last time, so we don't have to do that. Those were the most common asked questions that I've run into. And do we have anything else?
Yes, we do, Chris. There's a question in the Q&A from Thomas. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
He says, does the forgiven amount count in the year I received the loan or the year I received the forgiveness?
The year you received the amount. So you received the amount for in 2020. Now, let me answer it two different ways. One has to do with your accounting, internal, and not tax accounting. Tax accounting, it goes to 2020 unless you want to talk to your CPA tax guy about putting it into 2021, which could have something to do for basis if you are a corporation or a partnership with your own basis calculation there. If you put it in 2021, then there's no problem with it. And you have it on the books as a loan still. I know a lot of people are also putting it in 2020, and from an accounting perspective, most people are putting it into 2020.
Okay, and there's more. Margaret asks, I understand that the health insurance and consultant commission pay is not covered for the forgiveness as originally advised for PPP1.
Yes, for forgiveness, PPP1, health insurance counts. It was expanded in PPP2 for some of the principles involved in that. Otherwise, generally speaking, health insurance counts as an eligible cost for forgiveness in both. It's just the portion of the health insurance that the company pays for. So if the company paid $20,000, for example, in health insurance, you collected back from employees half of that. Your health insurance bill that you used for forgiveness is 10,000. You can only use what you paid for, not what you collected. And consultant commissions paid, no, it's only for employees. Independent contractors, 1099 people were required to do their own PPP application.
Okay, so that's all that's in the Q&A. Oh, I'm sorry, there's a couple more here. Let's see, okay, so Lisa's got a question that's in chat. If anyone else has questions, please throw them into the Q&A section. That's probably a little bit easier for us to manage than the chat. Here's a question from Lisa in chat. She says, since we haven't done our 2020 taxes yet, can we use 2019, as you just said? We have hardly worked during 2020, so our income is minimal and only unemployment.
Yes, I'm assuming that the question pertains to PPP2 application. Absolutely, you can use the 2019 payroll as a basis for that. And the same if you're sole proprietor or single member LLC, anybody who's using Schedule C as a basis for the application, you can use 2019. Everybody can use 2019 as a basis for the application, yes. And that's kind of what it was for. You had 2019, you have a reduction in 2020. Now, yes, the payroll is down, so you can go back to your 2020 to apply for it, yes. Oh, sorry, 2019. Use 2019 payroll to apply.
Great, thank you, Chris. So hopefully that answers all the questions today. If you have others, please throw them in the Q&A here. I'm going to share a couple of thoughts, and then I guess we can wrap up. Chris, unless you have any other thoughts, I was just going to show the YouTube page where we can find the recordings. Sure.
No, otherwise, if you have simple questions, send them to me. If they're difficult, send them to Tony.
So let me share a screen here. And we'll look at this and this.
And Lisa is asking what my email is. It is chris.carlsson, CARLSSON, @scorevolunteer.org.
Thanks, Chris. So just a couple thoughts here. Can you see my screen, Chris?
Yep.
So this is the YouTube.
I think you have to take down these things in front of it. So that might be on my side. Yeah, it's on my side. I can see you now.
Okay. Okay, so this is the Score Monmouth YouTube channel, and you'll see here some recordings. This is where you can find the recording of today's seminar if you want to revisit it again. Or if you haven't seen the previous seminars on PPP, they're up here, as well as a seminar about marketing to the government and Monmouth County CARES grant and a bunch of other stuff we'll be posting up here.
And a testimonial about how great Score Monmouth is.
Absolutely. And if you have anything great to say about Score Monmouth and you'd like to be featured on our page, feel free to record yourself and share it with us. We love to hear. We're all volunteers. You know, Score is a completely unpaid volunteer organization, and so we love to have testimonials. This is the Score Monmouth page. There's a lot of good information here about the local Score chapter in Monmouth County, New Jersey. You can schedule a session with a mentor. You can pick a mentor by our profiles. You can take a workshop here and look ahead to what we have on the agenda coming up from February through April. So I encourage you to join us on upcoming webinars or to select a mentor for some one-on-one business mentoring. And lastly, this is the national SCORE page. Again, they SCORE across the country. There's 250 chapters in addition to SCORE Monmouth across the country where mentors are available to provide guidance and answer your questions. Depending on what your specific question is, you can search locally, or you can just search for a criteria, a special business issue that you want, and find someone across the country that would be happy to help you in business. So with that, thank you for joining us. Thank you, Chris, for sharing your information.
My pleasure.
And we'll sign off now and look forward to seeing everyone at the next SCORE webinar.
Sounds good. Short and sweet. I liked it that way. Thanks, everybody.
All right. Thanks, Chris.